interesting that line, inquire who am I, know thyself and be free, that it's not in this new book. That's very interesting.
That's kind of the thing.
That's the thing. Yeah. That's why we're laughing about it this morning. It's like, okay, wake up. How do we wake up? We have to start by physically waking up, right? So, yeah. Show up. Show up is a good phrase. We have a new habit for this microphone. Remember it?
Yeah, it's adjust the gain.
And I'll move it a little closer.
Yeah.
So, okay. And we're going to be supporting each other. Because I'm here through tomorrow and then I'm out for 10 more days. You guys are back in rotation. So it goes up to the gain goes to halfway. And it's 1/3.
Okay.
When we start in the morning. We're trying. I listened to it for a couple of minutes yesterday. It was better. So we're trying to address whenever something comes up, adapted does accommodate. So, and that's actually the lesson for us in sadhana. That's the lesson. We'll discuss this morning. We're in karma yoga. These notions that we have, they don't serve us so well. These notions of what awakening is. It's like there's this desire to be high. There's a desire to be high. And we've had it for so long.
Yes.
We've engaged with drugs and alcohol, many of us, and sex, and lots of things in order to be high, in order to feel high. And then somehow we approach sadhana with the same idea. And we have this idea that bliss means being high. Bliss is thyself. So we're still seeking an experience instead of really seriously wanting to answer this question, who am I? It's very interesting. So I'm not complaining, I'm observing. I'm not judging, right? Because Swami had the same thing. Yeah. Okay, let's begin with Geeta Dhyana.
Or the yogi highs.
Yeah.
Maharaj?
Oh.
Is the symptom like guru high?
Well,
Is that just a symptom of that we already are? So it's not like you're seeking the high, but you are that.
correct.
Okay.
We'll discuss some today. It's perfect in the karma yoga discussion. Okay. So we should have Geeta Dhyanam. Everyone has?
This one doesn't. Some of them have two, I noticed.
Well, everybody has. Okay. All Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us. O Divine Mother, my affectionate Mother, on thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows. The milker is the cowherd boy Krishna. Arjuna is the calf. People of purified intellect are the drinkers. The milk is the supreme nectar of the Gita. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent and the crippled cross mountains. Okay. So, Chapter 3, Book 3, Karma Yoga. Here it's translated as the yoga of action. Sometimes it will be translated as the yoga of selfless action. But yoga is always meaning to come back to the center or to come up to the highest. That's the meaning of yoga always. So these chapters that are saying yoga of this and yoga of that word yoga is always important in the chapter. Even though every chapter starts yoga of, that word yoga is very important in each of the chapters. So don't forget the word yoga is there. Don't forget the meaning of the word yoga. It means to wake up or to come into the highest. Huh? So karma yoga, the yoga of action, or the yoga of selfless action, meaning how to achieve this yoga through action. Okay. So we read the first three shlokas yesterday. It starts with a question that Arjuna asks. Who wants to take a shot at paraphrasing that question that Arjuna asks? You can ask it in your own way. What's the question? Even if you don't try to paraphrase, what's the question? Relating to karma yoga, what's the question? Sorry?
Which is better, knowledge or action?
Yeah. You're extolling knowledge. Lord, I don't understand you. Because you're extolling knowledge, but you're telling me I have to do this terrible thing.
It's the action.
Yeah. That I have to do this terrible thing. That's the question. We all face this, by the way. Even though we might not be standing physically in a battlefield, still, do we not all have to face things that we don't want to do? Right?
Yes.
And here the Lord is extolling us to act. So, but dear Lord, you're telling me that knowledge of self is what's important. To know myself, you're saying that's what's important, so why bother acting then?
Right.
Huh? Do we understand the question?
Yeah.
Can you relate to it?
Most definitely.
So, because it's a question that we all ask in our own ways, isn't it? Why should I do this thing that I don't want to do? It doesn't seem important. Right? It seems like I can put it off and it won't. And it just isn't a big deal. Somebody else will do it.
Somebody else. That's a free one.
We must think that. So, okay. So that's where we pick up with exactly that. We're talking about, and I do really want to ask all of us, and then I really would like to encourage our family who join us online, either real time or after, also to consider what questions we might have or what comments, etc., we'd like to share, and just type them out in the comments. But this teaching is only helpful if it's practical. In other words, it's only helpful if it applies to your daily life. So please, let's do our best. And of course, this seems to be said in ancient times, in some of the language sometimes. Although this particular version, Swamiji does such an amazing job of providing modern language, modern examples, etc. Still, the tendency is to relate to it esoterically instead of practically. So let's try to do our best to relate to it practically and ask questions that in order to relate to it practically. It's been wonderful having Brett with us, Brett and Kalyani both, living householder life, not in the ashram, and so the questions are asking very practical, how to apply in day to day. And that's the crux of it, because you don't have to come to ashram. This is not being taught in an ashram.
Right.
This is being taught in a battlefield.
Yes.
So, okay. Number one, since you teach that the path of wisdom is better than the path of action, Krishna, why are you encouraging me to do this terrible act? He continues, I am confused by what seems to be a contradiction. Please tell me a sure way to attain the highest. So this is This is also important. There are a few sure ways that Lord Krishna provides in the Gita. And actually, if we want instructions for spiritual life, instructions to know ourselves, to attain the highest, what he provides is all we actually need. That's all the wisdom required. Then it's a question of acting it out, of doing it. Right? So Shravana, listening, Manana, contemplating, Nididhyasana, acting. As if it's true. As if it's true. So here now he gives us the first sure way. This is what Arjuna is asking. Please tell me a sure way to attain the highest. And this is right after, at the close of Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of wisdom, that he's explained what the highest is like. Lord Krishna ended the chapter by giving us a preview of what is the highest. The Blessed Lord said, Arjuna, in the beginning I gave the world a twofold path, the way of discerning wisdom, jnana yoga, and the way of selfless action. Selfless action being for active people, as it were. And then here's the wisdom that he begins to share about this action, this karma yoga. First, he says in number 4, ceasing to do things will not make you actionless, nor will you rise to perfection simply by renouncing actions. So he painted a picture of an actionless state at the close of chapter 2, at the close of Sankhya Yoga. He painted a picture of an actionless state. But now he's saying that ceasing or refusing to do action won't make you actionless. So if that's so, what's your question?
Right.
If refusing to act will not make you actionless, first of all, does that even make sense?
If you're looking at the mind and the action of the mind, yes. Because you could be doing nothing, but
So-
the mind is going crazy, so you're in mental action.
And let's say you refuse to act. You have a duty. Just take a moment with you. You have a duty. You're supposed to. You're playing some role. You have a responsibility with the family. You have a responsibility at the office. You have a responsibility in the community, whatever it is. So you have a duty. With householder life, it's actually very easy to understand what your duty is in a way. I have to make breakfast for Narayana. So let's say you refuse to do it. You say, no, I'm not going to do it today.
Suffering.
Backs up.
See if you can catch it. You say, I'm not going to do it. So is that choice not to do it? Is that action or is that actionlessness?
It's action. You're making a choice.
Right. It's an action that you've chosen not to act.
Not to physically act.
You've chosen not to act, and that is a mental action, and it has repercussions. It has fruit with it. The fruit might include, first of all, Narayana hitting you and saying, come on, wake up, feed me, I'm starving. And later on, it might include him getting sick.
Yes.
So, in other words, it has its own karma, which you must suffer. So your choice not to act is exactly the same as a choice to act. Does that make sense? So it is action. So it's not actionlessness. So ceasing to act, this is what he's sharing, ceasing to act does not take you to actionlessness. And just using that same example of the mother with the child, you see that actually if there's a place of actionlessness, I'm going to have to act in order to get there. So it will have to be a question of how do I act? Huh? You choose not to feed, not to get up and not to feed, there are repercussions, aren't they? And they're not pretty, are they? Does that make sense? Mother, you see that? So you don't have a choice but to act. You don't have a good choice but to act. Choosing not to act, which is where Arjuna was at the end of chapter 1, is an action. That's the first part of what's being shared. We'll have an idea of running away from our responsibilities. Right? That's where often yogis start the path. I can't deal with the world. I can't do this. Let me run away. But that is an action which has its fruit. You were going to ask a question.
It's
Or
just
say
so
something.
similar. Maybe something I'm yet to unravel within myself. I'm struggling on how to just play with Virla, and I feel that is my duty. But I just want to, example yesterday, I just want to read books. I just want to learn and learn and learn the yoga aspect. And so I'm halfway through Pilgram book, and there she is. I want to play. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. So you see, there's an expectation there. There's a desire there. It's a very personal desire. And we don't judge it because everybody's dealing with this stuff. They're just different. So we don't judge it. But still, you can see that actually doing what she's asking you to do is your duty. But you can also see you don't want to do it. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. It's a good place to start. It's a good place to start. Lord Krishna is saying here, but you have to do it. But you have to do it. That's what he's telling Arjuna here in the battlefield, but you have to do it. And he's explained why. And he's started to give the approach that needs to be taken. And that continues, that discussion continues here. But we all find ourselves with desires that are in conflict with our duties.
Especially this one, because you won't be able to sleep at night if he turns away. And all those people will just be looking at him like, why did you turn away?
Right.
Why did you turn away?
So the first thing he does here in this chapter is he takes away the option not to act, and he'll continue in this. He takes that away. He says, but you have to act. You have to act. So we'll continue with the next few slokas in the same vein. He says, ceasing to do things will not make you actionless, nor will you rise to perfection simply by renouncing actions. Now he painted the picture of perfection, which is perfect knowledge of self, perfect knowledge of relationship between devotee and that to which we're devoted, Krishna, for example, right? That perfect state of devotion would be described as that place of actionlessness, where I cease to be the actor. But also perfect self-knowledge, where we discussed where they're in perfect self-knowledge, knowing ourselves to not be this body, to be spirit. And however we look at it, and the Ani looks at it and says, I am that. The devotee looks at it and says, I am one with that. I'm not separate from that. Right? So that's a state. Nor will you rise to perfection simply by renouncing actions. There is a path to renounce actions, and that's discussed. Okay, he continues. No one is free from actions even for a moment, because everyone is moved to do things by the qualities of nature. So every moment there's a choice. We've already covered that not to act when action is called for is action, right? And it has karma, it has its own fruit. Yes? that can be a tough one. Do we get it? Do we understand that? It has its own fruit.
Procrastination.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you choose not to get up and come to satsang in the morning, for example. There's fruit from that, and it includes Swami visiting you and yelling at you.
Or just feeling weird and ridiculous.
Yeah.
The self-loathing.
Well, and eventually Swami comes and says, you haven't been able to do it for 2 months now, so you have to leave. You have to go find someplace else to live.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can't do your duty. And why? From this perspective, it's because you haven't seen yet that you're refusing to do it, and you're refusing to do it is an action. You've taken an action. And the action has repercussions. Right? Whatever it is. So not acting is action. We catch that, right? Not acting is action. That's the first with this Arjuna disease. The first feeling we'll have is this fight or flight, right? Facing our duty. If it's a tough one, I want to run away from it. I don't want to do it. So we're hearing here, but I don't have a choice but to act. I have to do something. And I am doing something by choosing not to act, or by choosing to run away, and that something that I choose has fruit. So now, we study later the gunas. We just, for a moment, we say tamas, rajas, sattva. So your action will be motivated by the qualities of nature within your own person, within the mind. So understanding that not to do one's duty, understanding that lying in bed when getting up is called for, is an action. It's an action motivated by tamas, dullness, lethargy. So, but still it's an action. It's not a non-action. This is so important to see. And it has fruit. And it has fruit. Oh.
But in Dominique's example, which I can completely relate to, it's your duty to play with the child, but it's also your duty not to play with the child, because the more you play, the more they expect. And at the end, they'll expect all your time, and their sense of right and wrong, their ability to entertain themselves disappears. So you have to live what you feel is right as a parent, and sometimes it is ignoring.
Yeah, taking into account what is the best approach to supporting the development of the child, the holistic development of the child, with what goal? That the child may be happy, may be fulfilled, may be satisfied. So same goal that we have for life. So we're the custodian, right? Indeed. Okay. Whoever stills the body as if seated in meditation, but mentally continues to think about sense objects, is deluded and a hypocrite. So, again, this will be related to refusal to act, a refusal to do what is called for in the situation. I'll read the commentary on this one. Swamiji says, many times we think, I'm fasting, I'm not going to eat anything today. But what about tomorrow morning? What shall I eat then? Physically, we may not be eating, but mentally we are. An action is evaluated by its motive, not by the action itself. Crimes committed without any planning are even pardoned sometimes, even murder. If you prove that you have not concentrated on it ahead of time, and that it just came up all of a sudden unpremeditated, then you might be excused. But even if you don't actually commit the crime, if it's proved you were concentrating on it and planning it, then you'll get the punishment. So he's speaking of the mental karma. Yeah. Oh. He says, this shows that the mind is more important than the action. Often so-called renunciates say, I have nothing, no attachments, I don't desire to do anything, but in fact, they're doing many things mentally. Maybe they go into a cave and sit there alone, but mentally they bring the entire world with them. And that's not true renunciation. Swamiji, our dear Swami Ramasrupanandaji Maharaj, he would say, whenever someone would approach him and say, Swamiji, I want to take sannyas, I want to be a Swami, he would simply say this, inner or outer? Inner or outer? In other words, are you prepared to renounce your desires? Or do you just want to renounce the actions, the duties? In India, many people would aspire to sannyasa because why? Because the sannyasis get to hang out, this is a perception, and get fed. And food is hard to come by. Mataji?
Duty of every householder to feed a sannyasi.
Yes. So we might aspire to sannyas because people will take care of us. Now, in the US, there's not much evidence of this. It's not seen as a duty to do something. So. But inner or outer, and here this inner action is actually more powerful karmic force than the outer action is. The intent. The intent. And then this hypocrisy, and we'll talk more about, again, completely non-judgmentally. We'll discuss a little bit more when we come back to the subject tomorrow morning in terms of how it develops and how to catch it. But we've developed this habitual nature, this desire to be seen a certain way in order to be treated a certain way, with the idea that being treated a certain way will give us the happiness that we seek. And it's such a deep habitual behavior that we often will not catch it. We've deluded ourselves so much and then made habits, right? If we love to be told a thing, oh, you're so beautiful. And if it feels good and we love to be told that, and we hate to be told, you don't look like you today.
Oh.
Then you see, without dealing with the inner beauty, we might choose, very common, isn't it, to just deal with the outer. And so we develop a greater schism, a greater split, a greater disintegration. So generally speaking, we come to spiritual path, intentional spiritual living, with a great schism, with a great disorder that's come in us, a great disintegration, no integration at all, because the inner is one thing and the outer is something different. And it seems to be important, the outer, what we do, so we want to appear a certain way, but on the inside we're not that way. We're thinking about something else. So I fast, the example he gives, I fast, but I'm thinking about food. That's not fasting. He's just sharing, non-judgmental. That's not fasting. Because the purpose of fasting is to purify. And we'll have the idea to purify the body. But the body is an expression of the mind. So the goal, if we're to purify, the goal has to be to purify the thoughts, the desires, the motives. It's only that purification that will take us towards this inner peace, you see. So here in this chapter, Karma Yoga, this is being dealt with, giving us the opportunity to look at ourselves and see, I had this terrible couple of years where I was trying to be with someone. It's all I wanted. I had this idea that if I were with this person, living with this person, having a life with this person, that I would be happy. These ideas are so amazingly crazy, but we don't see it. And then this duplicitousness that we learn in childhood in order to get what we want, right? So I want to play with the toy. Here, I'll give you an example. See if we've ever done something like this. I figured out how to game my parents at a pretty young age. This is why I always advise parents, watch your children very closely. Because I had figured out how to do it. The two of them weren't so close to each other. So they would fight sometimes, and then they, be silent. No. They just wouldn't talk with each other for a while. And they had different ideas and like that. And I had what I wanted. So for food, for example, I would want cheese puffs and ice cream or that kind of stuff. Which, of course, rightly so, they would tell me is terrible for you, but I wanted it anyway. And I had the idea that I was right, that this is, that's what I want. And if I wanted it, then I want it because, of course, it's going to make me happy. And so they would tell me I have to eat my veggies in order to do. And they would serve me veggies, and I'd wait until they were gone, and I'd scoop them off. And then I would lie, and I would say, I ate them. Now can I have some ice cream?
No.
Carry that, yeah.
Yeah. So it seems so innocent. But then you apply that later on, and you see now this duplicitousness that's developed in the character. It was there before, but now I want to be with this person. And I'm quite set on, I know I'm supposed to be with this person. And so I would say and do whatever is pleasing to this person in order to be with them. So she saw through it. Imagine that. Said I was a hypocrite. That word just like And one day I realized, yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Okay, so inner action is the real action. That's what's being shared. Inner action is the real action. If we want to look at what the karma is accrued from, the fruit of our action, it's from the inner action, much more than the outer action. Where is God? Inside. Who's the bestower of the karma? Mataji? Who's the bestower of the karma?
Your own self.
Capital S self.
Yes.
Capital S self. The Lord. The Lord. So, and when we're caught up in this, we have this idea that it's the outer action, and of course people might judge us on the outer action, but how will we judge ourselves? So it's a good contemplation of action, and what is action, right? That's where we start. So Lord says, you don't have a choice but to act. Does that make sense? You don't have a choice but to act. Whatever you do, you're going to act. Action is always required. So then the question becomes then, how can I act in a way where I reach this state of perfection? And that's what Arjuna is asking here. How can I act then in a way that leads to happiness and fulfillment and satisfaction? How can I act then in a way that leads towards self-knowledge and this wisdom? This is where we come, and this is where we pick up tomorrow morning as well, is the answer to this question. Then, if I have to act, and can we see we're always acting? You get up, you don't get up. It's action. You cook, you don't cook. It's action. Right? You sit to meditate, but the mind is going crazy. It's action. So, even in the dreams, you're dreaming a certain thing. It's still action. It's mental action. In the West, this is something so counter what seems to be the common notion in the West, that it's not important what I think, it's important what I do. But what we get is it's actually the opposite of that. It's important what I think, because what I think will influence and actually become what I do.
And what you think influences how you feel, therefore that's the vibrational hold to attract what you say.
Finally, happiness or not is determined by the nature of the thoughts. So it's not determined by the thing that happens. And you look and see, we avoid actions that we know we're supposed to take. Look, there's an inner payment for that, isn't there? An inner payback.
Right. Last night in Satchidananda, I felt.
And it gets so bad that we have to numb ourselves to try to get away from this feeling that we have.
But there's also somewhat of a powerlessness in your thinking, because there are social norms and behaviors you must have. Just because you feel a certain way about someone at the office doesn't mean you can express it. So you have to almost live a lie through your actions.
Well,
or synchronize your thinking with something more pleasant.
I understand we think that.
Mm-hmm.
I get it, and I get the perspective because I've lived that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a deeper place where there is love for all. There's a deeper place within you where there is love for all, and it's possible to touch and reside in this place and not be disturbed by actions of others, and entering this place of non-disturbance, actually be able to relate in a way that's beneficial, that's for the good, for the benefit of the one that now you say, you disturb me inside.
Right, it's definitely a better place to have that peace. It's almost like a double whammy if you have a bad thought about someone and you can't even live that truth because it's not appropriate socially. It hits you two different ways in a negative way.
Yeah. This place of perfection that Lord Krishna has described in chapter 2 is a place where these disturbances are no longer in evidence, and these ill feelings towards others are also absent, gone, don't have any existence. So, and a place where the motivation for what is done is only that which is beneficial, and where the duplicitousness has fallen away and no longer exists. And this would be called the goal of life, like this. So it is possible to be there, not just to act it. And that's the example that we're given, and the motivation and the inspiration that we're given is it absolutely can be done, absolutely can be found. And that's where it's so practical.
Mm-hmm. His Pilgram gives so many of those examples in her book. It's amazing.
Yes. That's where having the stories from the saints directly is so inspiring, because we get to see our potential. Right? It's not about her. It's not we can relate that way, but it's not. It's about who I really am and this potential that's within. Oh. Okay, we'll close with final prayers in RT, page 174. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukneva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshyama Mritata Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukneva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshyama Mritata Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukneva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshyama Mritata Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Shantu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyanto Makashi Dukhabhat Bhave Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Mritangamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purna Purnamudashate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto Thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold Thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve Thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember Thee. Let us ever sing Thy glories. Let Thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in Thee forever and ever. Om Bolo Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Bolo Saraswati Maharani Ki Jai.